Hello, how's everyone doing? Good. So, I feel terrible. I've said so to a number of people because I was just at Tony's talk, and if you were there, you know that nothing will beat that. Not this week. You just rhymed for a half hour. It was tremendous. So this will be a letdown for those of you who were in the other room before. I'm sorry, but it's well meant. It's also this is my non-technical year. I was doing a lot of very technical stuff last year. This year is more process-oriented, my stuff. Yesterday I had something about the abstract machine of C++ and what you should look out for. Today it's more of an adventure of sorts. With respect to a feature we're trying, some of us at least, me included, are trying to get into the language. That doesn't fit well, but that some people really need. Now what's interesting is that in this room, some people are fighting with me, and some people are in those who are suspicious of the feature. So that's interesting in itself. So we'll see where it leads us. You will be sad. There will be no conclusion to the talk because we're still working on it. So it's a process kind of thing. So how did we get where we are? What are the needs? What we care about? If you have never brought a proposal to the standard and you're wondering how things go, this will give you one example of how things go. Some people do that sometimes. I was there, did that a few years ago. If you want to get proposals in, what should you do? So it's more of a case study than an how-to, but anyway, it's a bad how-to though, because it's a very weird feature, as you will see. So let's see where this leads us. So for those who have never seen me, I have a few kids. I have 4 daughters. Somebody ID'd me yesterday, but I have 2 kids who are drinking age, which is amazing. It reminded me that a few years back, I went to the US with my dad, who's way older than I am, and they ID'd me, and then they ID'd my dad. So, I guess it's the law. So yeah, I have a number of animals too, because my wife works with animals, so I have between 15 and 25 cats all the time at home. And I love them. And I've been teaching for a long time now, so about 20 years. I'm at my 19th year, to be honest. And incidentally, I work on the C++ Standards Committee, among other things. I come from the flight simulator world. That's what I used to do before I started teaching. It's been a while, though. And among the things that interest me in particular, and is going to affect this talk, is the fact that I work a lot with the video game programmers. So I've been teaching and bringing up to date those who write the AAA video games in the Montreal area for the last few years, like about 10 or so. And their needs brought up a part of what you will see today. There are some of them in the room too, so they might react. So this is an overview. Working with the Standards Committee, it's seriously, it's a lot of fun in a perverse sense. I really like it, and I spent part of the day today answering questions. People asking, what does it involve? Well, it involves crazy hours. You get no money out of it. It just makes no sense. Except it's fun. It's fun if you're into that kind of stuff. So we come from all sorts of backgrounds. We all care deeply about what we do. Most of the people are very bright there, so they're all right in a way, even if they don't agree with you, and you're still right. And we all aim to make the language better for our users, but we have different users with different needs, and the needs of the language sometimes somehow conflict with the needs of the people. So it's a trade-off kind of thing where we're trying to maintain some kind of purity, make sense out of this. We have a direction to the language that we try to maintain. It meshes in weird ways, which is the essence of the title of this talk. So what I'm going to try to do is, well, try to get from user needs to, not to resolution in this case because it's not over, we're still working on it, but through the pathways that lead us towards something at the very least, which will give you an idea of how it works in some cases at the very least. And a respectful look at what goes on behind the scenes, because there are ISO rules, we don't say what's going on, we don't name people, but you'll still get some of an overview, and some people will make links there, of course, because they were in the room. And as I said, there's no resolution, because it's an ongoing process. We hope for a resolution of some kind at some point. So the actual name, where does it come from? Yeah. Sometimes we want to add things to language. Sometimes we want to fix or remove things that we see as broken. Brokenness is a relative term, depends on how you see things. We might disagree. When we discuss features that we want to fix, add, remove over mailing lists, some people think that when people disagree with them, they're all idiots. It's not true. It's not true. Darren said it this week, I think. I mean, one of the problems with the committee is that the good ideas that you bring in with all those right people that get shut down all the time is because they weren't necessarily as good as you thought in the first place. But sometimes you believe in it very strongly, and you're carrying the will or the wants of people, and you want to convince people that you're doing something right. So you're still fighting for it. What will follow is kind of an exchange between me and real members of the gaming community whose name you won't see here really. It's from a class I gave, so I'm there and I'm giving an upgrade of skills of sorts to people in between two projects about C++11 because that's where the community is these days. I know they could be further, but they're not because tooling and what have you. Time. So we're discussing the training facilities. They need that. They want it. So here they are. And we're talking and exercises and fun and complaints because future is underspecified and what have you. And then at some point, after a few hours of pleasure like this, someone says, "Hey, so cool, okay, so cool." So now in my company, we need to fix the stack size of the threads that we're running. We really need that. We depend on that, So how do we do this with new facilities? Which well, you don't. You don't because this kind of thing on most operating systems I know of, in fact, all of them, you have to fix them at construction time. And there's no mechanism in the standard right now to say such things at that moment. And so you look at the blank faces, and you get an answer. We won't use it. Which I just spent hours working on that and weeks preparing this stuff. So, this is kind of a letdown. and you say, it happens once. No, it's happened 30 times in the last 3-4 years. It's getting annoying at some point, because there seems to be a need, at least some communities. So the problem statement is, we have people who have needs. They do multi-threaded stuff a lot. Now, they might be too low level for the kind of work or the kind of APIs we want to provide. We want to provide them with cooler stuff, but there are communities that like to stick to the low level for a number of reasons that are okay in their domain. And some of them, not all of them, they would really like to use the standard threads. I mean, it fits with what they do, but given that we are not covering their needs right now, they cannot. They would like to. Some will never use, I'm sorry for the pop-ups. Some will never use what we're providing also, because they don't believe that standard tools can be like the operating system stuff. We cannot do anything for them. We're trying to avoid, some of us at least are trying to avoid ghettos. We have ghettos with the exception community. Some people use exceptions, some people don't. Those who compile with -f no exceptions, they feel let down because they feel like the language is not taking care of them. We're looking for solutions for these people because they're not an insignificant quantity. So it would be fun to do that with the threading stuff because it's kind of a big morsel, big piece. So we know that operating systems, they let you fix, most of them at least, such parameters as stack size when you create a thread. It's an example of something, of course, because there are other needs, but this one is talking, it's an easy one to explain. You can play with the things that the standard doesn't cover once you take the native handle of your thread or other such tools, because you can use that if you know what it means, because it's underspecified a bit, and that's a good thing in many cases, because we don't want to let the standard talk about the platform-specific stuff too much. But once we have something, if we can make sense out of it, we can actually call the operating system functions and play with it. The problem with stack size is once you've created your thread, it's too late. You cannot do that anymore. There's other things like affinity, priority, blah, blah, blah. So for these, right now we have no solution because we give the handle once it exists and it's over by then. Now, I had this talk yesterday about the abstract machines, which I won't repeat here, but there's a few things that we have to know if you weren't in a room yesterday with me. Let's make it like quickly. So when you're writing code, you're writing for a machine that doesn't really exist. It's an idea, but it has rules, and rules are very strict. And if your vendor is correct or nice to you, it's going to respect the rules or cheat in ways that are documented. So these rules give you guarantees. There's the as-if rule that says, oh, you will get a binary that's different from what you wrote, but you won't notice. If you're following the rules, of course. If you're doing undefined behavior, you know what's going to happen. You're going to lose money, your cat will die, and your parents will say they don't know you. So this machine is interesting to know about because, well, there are things that come with it. I was discussing with another prominent member, but this time of the WG221, and I was telling this person, well, my users, the stack size of their threads, they want to control that. So I have this idea. So this is what I was understood. So I'm telling people how I see things, and the person, who's a very prominent member, says, well, you know, you're trying to specify stack size. There's no stack in the abstract machine of C++. In fact, if you look at the standard for the word stack, you'll see one occurrence at some point, stack unwinding, because it's talking about exceptions, and it's a way to express what's going on when the exception is being thrown and we're cleaning up the place. And you'll see a std stack. So there's no such thing as an execution stack where you pass your arguments or what have you. It doesn't exist. So should we add those words in the text, there would be unpleasant consequences because we would be tying the machine to something that doesn't really need it. As has been told me a few times, there's systems where you have more than one stack per thread. There are features like coroutines that might not need a stack at all. So there are things you don't want to introduce in the standard because they're going to pollute it, in a sense. But now there's a tension. You know, there's this feature. We want to control the stack size, and we can't really express that. You know? So true, yeah. Need to think about it. Which leads us to revisiting the problem statement because there's a mismatch between the problem that we're trying to fix and what we can actually do about it. So they want to control that. It's a special case of a general problem, of course. And there's no such thing as the execution stack in the standard. So how do we write the words that carry the need, to some extent, to a resolution that could be satisfactory and does not pollute the standard? So it's a real problem. We have a real need for a feature. It doesn't. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I just said. So I tried that first at the CppCon 2015 SG14 meeting because it was the first time we did that. Whole day! Very cool. Lots of people came in. For most of them, for many of them at least, it was the first ISO meeting experience because it's an actual formal ISO meeting with ISO rules. Tomorrow is going to be like that too. And there were a number of things being discussed there. I wanted to bring the problem to the front, talk to people about it, so I hacked something that would not pass by any means, but to start a discussion. So I wrote it very fast, and I said, well, let's add an additional argument to the constructors saying this is what I want. That's when a member of the committee told me, well, no stack, so we can't talk about stack there, you're going to get into trouble. Anyway, you need something more general, of course. So we kept the discussion rolling through email and other means. Vicente, who's not at CppCon, I think, this year, who was from Brazil, works at Nokia, if I remember properly, wrote a proposal on his own to address that issue. It's P0320 in this case. That proposal was discussed in Ulu where he was. And I was called to participate in discussions because I had been involved a bit before. We'll get back to that. So we're there and we're talking. And there's, I think it was Vicente talking. but Vicente has broken English, so you have to imagine weird words there. Here's a possible way to actually specify a stack size without talking about a stack. So it's a cool thing. So you describe blah, 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 blah. And then there's someone who comes in and says, well, as I was saying earlier, there are machines where you have more than one stack per thread. So how does your proposal address this thing? It's a reality. You're going to meet that. So Vicente says, need to think about it. So how does it work when you have something like that you want to get through the process, get people talking about, discussing, maybe at some point agreeing on a solution of some kind? But this is a very rough overview. It doesn't make justice to the actual process, which is more complex. So you have to have a problem that you can express to people. Garnier was saying that again yesterday evening, if you were there. If you don't have a real problem to solve, why do you bother us? There's just so much to do. It's not that we don't like you. Maybe we don't. But that's not the point. The point is there's too much work. It's volunteer work. If you don't have an actual problem to solve that's going to help people, something significant, there are other problems that are more pressing. So you'll never get to the path. So yeah. If you could solve yourself by a library, maybe you should go to some other forum than the standard. Unless it's a very appropriate feature for a standard library, in which case you have to convince people. So there's only so much time and so much effort we can involve in such thing anyway. And then if you want people to talk about it, you have to write a proposal. Now some people will stop there saying, no. Writing? Not code. Well, maybe code a bit, but writing a proposal is necessary. If you want to get to the point where we're going to talk about it, well, if you didn't know about that, let me tell you, no proposal, no discussion. Okay, the standard people, they cannot deal with things that have not been put in writing and are not being brought up by the committee to the committee with an actual proposal that people could read beforehand. There's no time to do that. It's not because the proposals aren't interesting. There's just no way to process them. So yeah, it's volunteer work. You can float it around first. If you're not feeling confident that it's something ready for standardization, you can float it on the mailing lists and discuss with people. They're not all nice. It's going to be a pain. People will treat you like an imbecile sometimes. It's not because they don't like you, you don't even know who you are. They just disagree with whatever you wrote it, whoever you are, whatever you wrote. There are people who are specialists in there, and in a sense, it's not a bad thing once you've got this crust on you where it bounces, because it prepares you with the arguments, and that's fun. Also because since they're going to complain about so many things, well, you can take that into your proposal and make it more robust. Because when you're in front of the committee, you don't have much time to defend yourself. So yeah, you'll have an idea of what works, what doesn't. Float it around, discuss. And I decided to add that this morning. While we're at it, if you can actually have a reference implementation, sometimes it's cool when you can make it. It shows you can do it, and it shows you thought about the trade-offs, the ways you could do it that would work. You wrote some code, makes sense to you. And it's even better if you have user experience, like people that actually use that and give you feedback. That's really cool. When you write your proposal, sometimes people go overboard and tell the library implementers, for example, what to do and how to do it. The how is a bit too much. So these library people, you might not believe it, but they're actually very, very, very good. they're amazingly good. Okay. So if you're telling them how to do their work without knowing how they would do it and what they had in mind, you're just stepping in the way and blocking them from doing some really good work. So express it in terms of what you expect, what the results you want to have, not the how, the what. The interface, maybe the complexity if you know about it, but let them work. Okay? They're impressively good. And then, should you get there, you can actually come to a committee meeting and present it. Now, it can be intimidating, especially if it's something tied to evolution, because it's a big crowd, and they're not nice to one another when they discuss. It's very rough. And it's not because it's you. They shoot everyone down. It's like going into an arena where there's lions and people are just like, and trying to kill you. Except in an almost civilized manner. There are other forums at WG21 that are more civilized, but Evolution is a big group, and when you go there, it's rock and roll a bit. But you have to go there or have someone go there for you. Okay? They call them champions. I've done that before, even for something I was sure would not pass. Sometimes it's interesting to get feedback and help people around. But so if you get someone who believes in what you're doing and thinks it's a good thing, even if it's not perfect, you're gonna get a champion. So most of us do that from time to time. Why not? But it's better if you come there yourself, because you can actually hear people, see how they react, ask questions, gather guidance, everything. And it feels good. Now, you're not going to be paid probably to do that. You're going to pay to work, so you get the feeling of what this is like. Yeah. So if you're sending a proposal out, but you're not coming, and no one's defending it, it looks bad. You know, like no one cares. It's a hard sell. Okay, so it's better if someone takes care of it. It's not because you're bad, you know. But if no one cares enough to present it, I mean, it's hard to tell people you should really look at it anyway. You know? And then you get guidance. So you'll get from whichever group you're talking to, they will give you feedback. That's actually pretty cool. Sometimes they'll tell you, no, stop working on that, that's bad. But most of the time, you'll get some orientation as to where you should direct your thing, encouragement to continue, avenues to explore, alternatives to consider, previous papers you might have missed on similar topics that you should look at because you're entering the same pitfalls as they did. There's just many things you could get from people who have been there for a long time, who have different perspectives, who ask questions you didn't think about. It's very worthwhile. So get guidance, that's actually pretty cool. Even if it's a pain. Even if you don't like the guidance, it's useful still. So at some point you'll try to convince the people, and then you'll get guidance. That's how it works. And they might even like it. To a point. and they might tell you other stuff. but that's okay. I mean, that's okay. Sometimes you get out and say, oh, I didn't need that because this is way too much work for the time I have. Maybe you will skip a meeting or two. Yeah, happens. They're not done. Even if they seem like enemies, they're not done. They really care about the language, and if they're giving you guidance, it's because there's something to do. It's not to make you waste your time. And so pay attention. So you might go back to write another version of the same proposal. So you have R1, R2, R3, R4. It can go way up. And take the guidance into account. And sometimes it's very simple things, it's wording, because it can go through many groups within the standard because it touches on core language, some library stuff, concurrency stuff, so you'll get guidance from many locations. That's just normal, that's okay. And sometimes you might even want to reconsider the actual approach in the first place. And sometimes you took that from a wrong angle, and there's no shame, it's part of the game. We all go through that, even the well-known people do that. Sometimes you get very far, and gets shut down because there's a deep problem within it, and you have to accept it. And in the end, you heard this week, if you didn't know about it, that some problems have been there for decades, and they're big ones. Well, you could continue, you could stop, you could discourage yourself, and or something else could come along that just fits in better, and it might make your stuff obsolete, and you've wasted years of your time. But you learn stuff along the way, so that's cool. These are different reviews. You're laughing. You wouldn't laugh. So that's not where we are with this one. There are concepts that have been there forever. Everyone needs it. Everyone wants it. What's the it? That's the problem. So we stated that thing in 2015. We had an official meeting, that's cool. There was useful feedback because we have a great community. The people in this place at this time are awesome. And we got many directions, it was very interesting. We started working with that. Vicente did, I did, others did. And so Vicente took a stab. 2016, we're in Olu, we're working on that, we're discussing things, we're getting other feedback. So you can read the paper if you want, of course. His proposal was something called thread attributes. So the idea was, let's make a class of some kind, where we know it exists, it has a name, but we don't really say what's in it. It's a black box. let the vendors decide what they put in there, but let's encourage them very strongly to be coherent with one another. Add to the namespace level maybe or something, like GNU something and MSDC something or whatever. Something that makes sense together, that avoids an if-def soup of kind, at least for common stuff, affinity, whatever. And there was something that went with that called get attributes that would let people query at runtime what would actually be associated in terms of behavior with individual threads. Why not? So it wasn't shut down. It's a weird hybrid. You tell me, oh yeah, there's a standard type of which we know almost nothing of. But we expect it to be useful. So yeah, it's clever. It's clever. So we're trying to get, if we can try to get vendors to agree on something, we don't have to specify it in the standard. It's going to work. People are going to be happy. Yeah, it's good. So the guidance from SG1, of course, there are SG1 people in the room right now. It was much more complex than that. But continue exploring. There are edge cases you need to take care of, but it's not a bad solution. Something that requires more thought. Okay, why not? So Vicente goes back, talk a bit, it says, oh, you have an accent, you must speak French. Yeah, I do. So that's what we did. So he went back and worked on an R1 thing, which you can see there. And David Baker was in the room, Archer was doing talk just before me, and myself worked on a complementary proposal, both of which I championed at ISAQUA. So my own proposal and the one from Vicente because he couldn't go there. And there's a typo there. It's not Lil, it's Link. So I should fix that later on. So why two proposals? Because there's two things there. Vicente was worried about the features to support when you construct your thread and a way to specify that, which is the core of the problem in the first place. But there's also a problem of reporting failure. So if you're asking for something that makes no sense or cannot be performed by the platform, you're going to need to know at some point. No. The two proposals were not really interdependent, but the three attributes were used, or something like it in the factory thing that I'm presenting. And the factory thing could use something else, but it kind of meshed together. There was a way to promote them all together, in a sense. A thread attribute aware constructor is a constructor. So should it fail, there is no real way, apart from terminating, of course, which is a bit violent, but works in some cases. I know Nicolas, I'm aware of that. You're probably going to report your problem through an exception in such a case. Now, you have to know that the gaming community is part of the ghetto I was talking of earlier on today, and they will not use exceptions, even if they're faster than anything else they could muster, because they couldn't care less. So if we stopped at this and it passed, we would still have a problem, because we would have a feature that the expected user base wouldn't be touching with a mile length pole, which would be sad given the quantity of effort involved in that. Yeah, so that's it. So if you do a good feature, but your users don't care, you're not well off. So the other one, the accompanying proposal was factory function, such that we could report the problem otherwise, an optional or something that would tell you, well, didn't work, damn it, but there was no exception involved in telling you about it. So at least you can use it in your own code, should you care for other stuff. We didn't go into detail as to what we would return. That was a bit beside the point at that point. So expected, maybe should we have one at some point, an optional, a tuple of features that passed or did not pass. And if you want complex diagnostics as to ask for this. I got 3 out of 4. Do I keep it up anyway? Was it sufficient? Whatever. It didn't preclude thread attributes over constructors. You could have both. You know, some people care about exceptions, not that community, but others do. So why not? Thank you. Wong. I'm going to be fine. Yeah. So there was room for both. Both were discussed in ISAQUA. So you have to remember that the ISAQUA, you probably don't know about that, but the ISAQUA meeting was during the week where there was the presidential election in the United States. and Leonard Cohen died. It was a very strange week. It's very awkward now. That meeting was one of the last days. It was very interesting. The SG1 people, some of them really liked the idea of the factory function. Some of them were very reluctant to use that for many reasons. One of these, which is very easy to understand if you think about it, is that there's a direction to what SG1 does. And one of the important directions is executors, these important objects that describe the way some computation will be performed, will be useful in a number of cases, but they're not there yet. They're coming. We want them. They're going to be used in many cases, but they're in the future as of this speaking. And the other problem is that the users have a need today. So yeah, someone's using music. So one of the things that preoccupied people in the room were, well, is this thing in tune with where we're going, which is totally like legitimate. It's very interesting, really. I want to put it there. Even if you're getting resistance for something that you think is right and useful, the comments of the people in the room, they're all extremely right, and it's very enlightening. So even if you get shut down, it's cool to be there. We got guidance, and the guidance wasn't stop. It was explore, which is good guidance. Sadly, it was painful guidance also because it's explore huge stuff. So explore make thread function, because some people really like that, using thread attributes. So check the design. Check what it would look like, use cases, how you could call the thing, how it would react. Examine the return types, make it clearer a bit. Sketch an implementation maybe to see what it will involve. Not tell people how to do it, but just give an idea of how it could be done or something. And there was something else that I had slightly mentioned as a passing thought in the original paper, the 484R0, was that we could envision, I didn't think we would go there though, the act of creating a thread using platform-specific facilities, so create thread or pthread create or something, whatever, pthread create, get the native handle and adopt it in an STD thread. Now, that's, in French we say panier de crabe, for crab basket. That's a problem, but it's an avenue that some people liked. So they asked us to check what it would entail too. So I went outside of the room thinking, okay, work. Yeah, work, why not? So we had to check the trade-offs of the two to see if we could make it work in both cases and what were the pros and the cons. And one of the things they told us was you should really support the get attributes facility in a way, regardless of whether you picked one or the other, because it's something that we think would be useful in the long term anyway for the low-level stuff. Now, knowing things about the threads that are running, should it be a member function, a non-member function that takes an ID, whatever, there has to be a way to do that. Okay, so let's see what we can do with that. Another thing that they told us was that even though we had opened the door for high granularity diagnostics with per feature request error reporting, told us no, that shut it down. It works, fails, simple. Fair enough. Okay. So that's clear. I mean, the direction is if you want finer grained stuff, do it otherwise. But the facility you're doing for, it works or it doesn't work, and that's sufficient for us. Okay. So it all stayed put for meetings. That's something interesting to know. Sometimes you either cannot go to a meeting because, well, work, money, family. No, I was in Kona, but I didn't have the time between November and the March meeting to work on that stuff. I had too much stuff to do. So it stayed put, and we worked on other stuff. That's okay, just part of work, part of life. Toronto, a few months ago, so it's very recent, we brought a revised version of the factory function kind of thing, including the case study that was asked and the adjustments to the return types and those things, the error reporting, a short study of the get attributes, so it could be like. So me, Billy, Arthur again. The link there is okay. So we tried to address the comparison of a create the thread in a non-standard way and adopt it within, or do the creation through some factory mechanism and see what happens. There was no update to the thread attributes proposals, which stayed as is. That's okay too, because it's not essentially dependent. That would be tricky. We could use something else. So the adaptation thing turns out to be very tricky, and it's very dirty. Because one of the things is, as you can see there, the native handle, we don't really say what it is. In fact, I was talking to some of the Microsoft people when I was writing that thing, and told me, we don't even know what it is. It should be the ID, the handle, what are we doing with that? It's not specified really, so open ground, we weren't really expecting people to use that. Some people said, I was actually told by someone, it's a POSIX thing. No, it's not, it's just whatever you decide to do with it. Okay, so if we wanted to use the native handle by creating something outside of the box and bringing it in, well, the vendors would at least have to commit themselves to one or the other. That's something. And then the other problem is, in what state is your thread when you bring it into the machinery of the sender, because you created it elsewhere? So is it running, dead, faulty? Sometimes you can create but not start right away, so maybe it's not even started. There are things like that. And the other thing, which is more of a pain to me, because we're trying to avoid the ghetto again, is if your users are creating your threads outside of the box, and it's running, they already included all the headers, they already went through the effort of whatever they had to do to use their platform stuff, well, why would they go back? Well, what's the point? And so we're creating our own ghetto if we do that. So in fact, that's the point I think we were making in that case. And the make thread, we worked on again a bit, taking into account the comments we got, prefer supporting the get attributes thing, providing a kind of possible reference implementation to show how it can be done. They needed that, very good work. And we expressed the preference for that approach, but we're not the ones deciding. If in the end someone's saying, well, the first one is very much better in our perspective, that's where the language is going to go. I mean, it's not for me to decide. So as you can see, community work, it's not just technical stuff. There's politics. There's the needs of different individuals. There's a power play going on because they're working for companies, schools, countries, and they want stuff. They don't all want the thing. So there's a consensus thing that we have to reach. There's human aspects. If you're telling people they're dumb, it doesn't start well. It works well in the email stuff sometimes, but in real life, these people are actually nice and you can have a beer with them. So telling them they're dumb, beer is not interesting that much. You have to interest people. I mean, if they're not convinced, they won't push for it. And you need push. We're numerous and we work by consensus. If you have a majority vote on something, and it's a majority by one instead of consensus, you haven't won anything. And you have to convince. And if people don't believe you, it's not their fault. It's your job. If you're not able to convince them, well, your point is not strong enough. Work on it. And you have to listen, of course, because feedback is important. And you have to be lucky sometimes. Because sometimes you have to be at the right place, the right moment, and convince the right person that will spread it out. Yeah. So in Toronto, we were unlucky. That happened. I didn't think we would pass because SG1 has quite the schedule. They have a lot of work to do, and it's significant work. But we got called to express this thing at the very end of the week. We were the last ones to present. Now, if you've never been to a meeting, you have to know that the meetings, on Monday, they start at 9. The other days, they start at 8:30. And most of the days, except on Fridays, because we're all very tired, they tend to end at 10 in the evening. Okay? So it's not a pleasure cruise. And it gets worse sometimes. In Oulu in 2016, there was no moment when the sun wasn't shining because we were 500 kilometers north of Helsinki in June. Okay? So when you're in the library and you're working on issues, and it's 10:30 in the evening, and it's still very sunny because the sun never goes down. So to say, well, let's keep on working. It's sunny outside. Speaking as the one who was taking notes that evening, I was very tired. I found that interesting. So the SG1, we can understand that. They have their hands full. They have a lot of work. It's a very difficult group. The questions are deep. So we were the very last ones. So I still tried to enter, So I did something like this to get them interested first because they were all tired. And we got the ball rolling, started discussing, and of course it was interesting because interesting subject matter, bright people and all. It's running well, and then that time runs out, so we're wondering, what do we do with that? There's no time left, and we agree that there's something to be done about this. We don't know what yet because we'll think about it, but there's no time left. And community work, you have to respect the time constraints. And we have to take breaks at specific moments because otherwise we'll never stop. So we all decided that, well, it's going to be one of the things we discuss, hopefully early in Albuquerque in November, because if we rush that thing, we're going to mess it up. That's the point. So just luck sometimes. If I had been there a few hours before, it might be solved today or it might be dead, whatever. So where are we going with this? As you can see, it's a complex matter involving many things, including technique. So the plan is to discuss this in Albuquerque. If I can be there, I'll be happy. There's a financial issue there. We don't know what the status of the thread attributes thing will be. It's still open because it wasn't rediscussed. It wasn't dead or anything. Maybe it'll be an update, I don't know. And since we have started discussions on the make thread facility but not finished it, we don't know where this is going either. We'll learn about that soon. I have hopes, of course, because we fought for that. And there's surprises that happen. Now, Michael Wong has started something with heterogeneous computing related to his latest job because working on intelligent cars these days. It's very cool. Of the papers that we saw pass by in a recent SG14 meeting, SG14 being the low latency group, there was this thing there, D0737, so the D things are they're under discussion, they're not formal proposals yet, but something about the execution context of execution agents, that's the actual name of the thing. And it defines a minimal execution context type, something that says in what state the execution context is right now. And there's actually a thread execution resource in there that describes how the thread is behaving and what it is about. So that might be, should it be included at some point, an interesting alternative to the thread attributes thing because it covers the same subject matter really, but it's closer to the executor work that has the favor as you want. So there's something interesting there. So it might be the preferred solution because it's kind of the same thing in some cases. And the make thread proposal that we're trying to push through could use either of these, really. It doesn't really care. So we don't know where this is going to lead us, but it's a surprise, a nice surprise, I would say, that came into our hands in less than a month ago, I would say. So that's pretty much where we are. Is there a conclusion? Well, there's no conclusion, as you can see. But the process is interesting, which is why I suggested this talk. There's lots of factors involved, and I've been at this for 3 years now. I still find it fascinating to see how things work. So I thought I should share that with you guys. On the design side, well, as a reminder, you have to understand what you're doing, describe use cases, because otherwise you will convince nobody, and you have to have a solution that fits with the rest, even if the problem case doesn't. And it's tricky, as you can see. Error reporting in this specific case needs special handling because our users won't use just anything. They're special. And on the technical side, well, you have to check the APIs. And there's many things you can do. They're not all easy. There are costs. If you have a get thread attributes that takes an ID as argument, you have to store the data somewhere outside of the thread. Maybe there's something to do about that. It's worthwhile to write potential user code to see what it would look like. I mean, there are some stuff that I wouldn't use myself, so I wouldn't propose it. And if you have many possible use cases, you have to compare them and make sense out of them and pick some. And there are painful bits. Sometimes you can end up with the implementation-specific stuff that are parameters of the abstract machine. You can have risks of undefined behavior. In the adaptation case, it's a real risk. The diagnostics thing was a problem. And even if you're just sticking with the let's make a new constructor or add arguments, you're changing sometimes signatures in unforeseen ways that might damage existing code or make it more complex. So it's never easy. So you're never designing in isolation. There are so many other things that you have to take into account. I'm almost done. And the standard is something we have to care for. So it's not a beast that we can damage, and it's never as easy as people think. Some people complain that standard work is too slow. Well, yeah, it's slow because we take care. So on the human side, yeah, lots of work, lots of people, often teamwork, but I'm lucky because I have great co-authors and great human beings. I'm really, really lucky. It requires patience, humility, because you'll always be wrong in someone's eyes, and they're always right. And yeah, as again Björn said, your good ideas are not as good when you express them in writing as they were in your head. You know, and Leslie Lamport, I think, said that a few years back. Recently, when he won the Turing Award, he was saying, "Well, you know, as long as it's not written, it's not science. No, if it's not written, you're not in the scientific world. You're tabulating something." So the process is a pain. It's slow, but it makes things better. So we care, not we cares. I'm sorry. So the real conclusion is, yeah, we continue. I hope it was interesting. You can take a shot at this if you want. What if you want to parameterize? So Mr. Kato says, what if you want to parameterize such a thing as async for parallel algorithms? I would need to study the question to more detail to have an answer really. But if you write it and examine the design issues, you might have the answers yourself, or bring them into consideration and get new surprises talking to people who have thought about it more than we have. So write it first and we'll check it out after. Yep.
All right, I'll be doing the microphone thing. So you mentioned that most people don't get to the part where they write a proposal when they have an idea, and you also mentioned that the first thing you do when you have a proposal is show it to evolution, where it is a wild and toxic environment. Don't you see a link there?
There's not only evolution. Okay, so evolution is a big group. It's interesting to see. There's core, there's library evolution, there's many things there, and there's the study groups also. And the same proposal can go through many of these depending on the bits and pieces you're doing. So new feature, new keyword, evolution, gonna take a look at it. If you're getting to the nitty-gritty of how things work, you're gonna end up at core. It's a completely different experience. You're in core, nobody talks to you, there's no sound, and every time someone speaks, it's scary. I totally love it. So it's much less intimidating to some people to live to that experience than being shut down in evolution. But first, if you float it around on the internet and you get reaction from people, you might be better prepared for actual committee work because most of the basic problems will have been covered by other people.
All right, thank you.
Anything else by anyone else? Yep.
There's another feature that doesn't fit.
Oh, no, please, no.
The calling versus the calling configuration. Seems to be also about missing compilers.
Call CC, yeah, that's another SG1 thing. Yeah. So if you want to work on it, are you the one who's proposed the call CC thing? Okay. I've seen it pass by a few times. There's the same kind of effort. I mean, should someone care about it enough to bring it along the way through the process, maybe it will pass. But it might pass through a number of transformations before we end up with a good fit. And it's fine. It's fine.
It's closely related to proposals that are like coroutines, like what's it called? The paper that's basically about boost coroutines.
Yeah, the stateful and stateless coroutines. Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely movement happening in that space, whether or not specifically a policy.
So Jeffrey is on SG1 most of the time. So should you have questions, you can actually talk to him. Anything else? It's better if you go to the microphone though, because they're going to record you and find your voice so beautiful on the internet afterwards. And when people will complain about my voice, because I do that, Well, they'll have your soothing voice. Yep.
What will you say is the minimum to write a proposal?
You'll see that on the ISO-CPP website, isocpp.org. There's an how to write a proposal kind of thing there that will guide you. There's a number of formats we support, not that many. I think we have a form of Markdown, we have HTML and PDF essentially.
Yeah, but
there's things to put in there. You'll have a guideline.
I did read that, but it's more like what do you feel is needed? Like, do you think it's really needed to get into the public forum for the feedback on new papers, or do you feel that you can bypass that and just send it?
Okay, I haven't gone through forums with mine because I knew there was a need because it came from an actual big group of significant users. So I felt confident to go out there and fight for it. And there were others on the committee who had experience similar to mine from other domains. So we knew it wasn't a game thing. It was a more... So if it's your first proposal, it's interesting to fight for it a bit before, because if you come to the committee, unknown person, unknown quantity, never done that before, the steps are very high.
So it depends on the subject?
We'll iron it out a bit.
Yeah, okay.
So, but it's not pleasant.
Yeah, I guess.
So you have to be ready, as long as you know. Yeah? And as long as you remember, it's not about you. Anything else? Have a nice end of the